My name is Colin Donnelly. This is my review on Primal Leadership, Realizing the Power of Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman, Richard Boetes, and Anna McKay. About the time this class started, a mentor at work, one of my colleagues, had given me two books to read. One was Emotional Intelligence 2.0 by Travis Bradberry. The other book was Primal Leadership, what we have going on right now. Um, at first, right when the class started, I had just started reading Emotional Intelligence, which goes in depth into explaining what emotional intelligence is, why emotional intelligence is so important, and different scenarios and ideas and how you can work on your own emotional intelligence to be more successful in both your personal life and your business life. Second, going into primal leadership, that essentially takes what you learned in Emotional Intelligence 2.0 and goes more in depth how you can use your strong emotional intelligence to become a stronger leader, better understand emotional intelligence in the workplace. So I was really excited that this book was part of the list to be able to review, as I already had it listed to be able to start reading and reviewing on my own. So I was excited to be able to have the opportunity here. Um, Primal Leadership does a great job of explaining different leadership abilities as well as how your brain functions in response to these leadership actions. So it takes everything from your emotional intelligence, your personal feelings, and your understandings, and actually how your brain works so that you can better understanding why you feel the way that you do or why others might feel a certain way about you as a leader. Primal leadership argues that the ability of a leader to engage and direct the emotions of the followers is a critical component to effective leadership. Daniel Goleman states, I quote, "The emotional task of a leader is primal. That is, first, in two senses, it is both the original and the most important act of leadership," end quote. A leadership has the strongest influence on the collective emotions of a group of people. It is primarily their responsibility to move the emotions of this group in a positive direction and help clear any negative emotions that there might be. This process of moving emotions in a positive direction is called renaissance, while the opposite of doing this would be called dissonance. Basically, looking at, there's two different types of leaders. There's resident leaders and dissonant leaders. A resident leadership does not only imply that you're using positive emotions, but they're more dependent on the empathy connected with others and their emotional levels. It makes you feel like you care and shows that you care for these other people. Basically, it gives you that connection, that feeling of resonance, almost like you're on the same wavelength with this person that you're trying to communicate or with these people that you're communicating or leading. We've all had friends, families, coworkers that you just feel like you're on the same level as them, and it's very easy to communicate. It's very easy for one person to understand how this one person feels and why they might feel that way, and to be able to communicate with them. This is a very effective way to be a leader. And the Daniel Goleman basically explains that it's almost like you're in sync with each other, and your brain is going to be much more inclined to remember the information that's being given to you and to be able to come up with the correct information to relay to this individual. It just makes overall communication much easier. Resident interactions help to produce an ongoing positive feeling in the people and translates into greater productivity in the workplace. Now, dissonance, on the other hand, involves feelings such as anger, the feeling of a lingering negative emotion. Again, opposite of what we just went over. We've all had those conversations with people, maybe managers, someone that you just don't get along with, a family member, that every time you think of this person or every time that you plan on having a conversation with them, you just think of negative feelings. It's because you're not on the same wavelength. You don't fully understand or know how to communicate with each other, and this makes the whole situation very difficult. So it goes very in depth in explaining the idea of these two different types of leaders and why your brain makes you think of somebody in a certain sense and maybe somebody completely different. You remember these feelings whenever you think about that person, so that's always something to keep in mind. Going over a little bit more into emotional intelligence, as the book does go pretty in depth into the different areas of emotional intelligence. Primal leadership draws directly in upon emotional intelligence of a leader. Emotional intelligence is the ability to understand both your own feelings as well as the feelings of others. It helps you discriminate between different feelings and label them appropriately, and to use the emotional information as a guide to thinking and how your behavior works. So basically, understanding your emotions and the emotions of others really helps you execute what you're going to say or what your next move is going to be. If you can understand both your own and others' emotions, you will be able to know how to handle many different types of situations better and with a much more positive result. Again, if you haven't already looked into emotional intelligence or read Emotional Intelligence 2.0, for that matter, I do recommend reading that as well. It really helps be a great prequel into the Primal leadership because it really goes a little bit more in depth into why emotional intelligence is so important. Now, there's 4 different areas of the emotional intelligence. First is self-awareness, and this is going to be one of the most important parts as it really goes into the other 3 portions of the emotional intelligence. Really understanding your emotions, your strengths, limitations, and your values. You can't really work on the other 3 areas if you don't already understand where your strengths and your weaknesses currently lie. The second option would be, the second portion would be self-management. This is the ability to manage your own emotions, which allows you to live with transparency, which then allows integrity and also critical sense in your leading. So if you can work on understanding once again what your emotions are and be able to manage your emotions, it's going to be the next step in becoming emotionally intelligent. Next, looking at both social awareness and social management. It's basically the ability to relate to leaders or other people's emotions and the ability to empathize and understand where others and how to respond to other people's emotions appropriately. Basically, if you can understand how somebody or why somebody is stating something or feels the way that they currently do, you can understand how to relate to them and be able to better communicate with this individual or be able to take on the next positive actions. There's basically 6 different types of leadership that primal leadership goes into. 6 of these styles, 4 of the styles reflect resonance, and the other would reflect dissonance. Um, all of these different styles do have the correct time and place for each. This is basically understanding which areas of leadership are your strengths and when to use each type of leadership appropriately. The first, and then going over the 4 different resonance styles, first would be a visionary leader. This inspires others on a new vision, maybe in a company or a vision that a company has, and you're trying to inspire these people to understand why you want to go in this certain direction and why you should feel a certain way and the positives about this new area. You're basically painting the picture of where this group is going and what they need to do to get there. This is the best style, essentially whenever there's a new direction that's needed. And there's the coaching leader. This takes place more on a one-on-one type of dynamic. We all understand what coaches are. We've all had coaches in one form or another. It's basically a good way to connect with someone and help them develop a light to their goals and overall organization goals. Basically, a little bit more of a one-on-one, understand what somebody's needs are and what they can do to improve and what you're looking for. Of course, this is always great for building more long-term strengths with somebody, again, on a one-on-one situation. The third would be the affiliative leader. This basically builds connections among a group, valuing the emotional needs, understanding what the group is looking for, the personal relationships within the group. Um, Again, this is going to be best used for healing rifts, getting through stressful situations, and being able to best understand what a group needs and what a group looks for. These two different situations, both the coaching leader as well as the affiliative leader, reminds me a lot of week 2 in the TED Talks video, putting human back into human resources, essentially taking the time to build a connection with people that you're working with or that might be working for you. Taking the time to acknowledge them, making them feel like they fit in and what they're doing is important, and we need them to be successful as a company or as an organization. Because ultimately, that's really what people care most about in these types of organizations and situations. Feeling like they belong, feeling like what the job that they're doing is important. Of course, people still want benefits, job security, as well as a strong income, but knowing that they're appreciated, knowing that they fit in and that they're important, really makes a strong impression on an individual. So I think as a coaching leader, as well as the affiliative leader, they have the ability to really zone in on the human interaction and the strengths in regards to that. There's also the democratic leader. This basically helps to develop a consensus among a group and helps people feel like their input is important and helps them basically takes the ideas from an overall group of people and to combine them into one to come up with one successful outcome, I guess, essentially. This is used good when you're trying to when there's simple inputs that might be needed in an ideal, or you're trying to get people to buy into a situation, essentially taking their inputs and to being able to turn that into one overall goal. And that's a great way, again, to get people feel like they're involved and they're important. All of these different areas, it's all about the resident being able to get on the same level as people and understand what's important to them, what's important to you, what's important to the organization as a group, to kind of get on a positive wavelength and to get together and really be able to work well with each other and to lead these people in a positive direction. Looking at the two other styles of leadership, these are more of a dissonant style of leadership. There's pace setters is going to be one style of leadership. This is basically when you're a leader, you expect excellence. You thrive on basically having highly competent and motivated individuals. You have a clear objective, and you're basically saying this is what the goal is. Go do it. Make it happen. Maybe this is something that you would see in a lot of sports. In the NFL, you have the top players, the starting players, and you're going to tell the rest of the team, this is what I'm looking for. This is if you want to be a starter. This is what needs to be done to be a starter. Or maybe in a sales company, here's the goals that we're setting. We need to make sure that we're hitting these goals. Just go out there and make it happen. Um, Again, this is going to be used best when you already have a group of motivated individuals. Um, it's not really a pat on the back, great job, keep going. It's more of this is what you're looking for. I better see results, more or less. And then that goes into the next, which is the commanding leader. This essentially, you have a powerful stance. You give clear direction. And you expect full compliance. There's really no leeway in what you're demanding. This is the way it's going to be done. There's not an option. Make it happen. So kind of going off of the pace setters, but much more strict, much more, I guess you could say, a tyrant approach to leadership. This is generally the managers that are the type of individuals that get results, but no one necessarily likes these leaders because they can be difficult to talk with. They don't really give a whole lot of guidance. They just tell you to get the job done. And these dissonant styles, they can have a toxic effect on the group climate, um, but they can be very effective when used in specific situations. Sometimes you do have to use these types of styles if you're not getting any results with a more resonant style of leadership. So all these different styles do have their appropriate times um, when going into them. Now, most people tend to favor one particular style of leadership over another. Maybe this is an area that you're pretty good at, something that you've had experience in before. However, it's important to be able to develop all of these, and it's known that all of these different types of leadership can be learned and executed well by the same individual, and ultimately knowing when to be a successful leader. Primal leadership goes into explaining that you really have to have an understanding and really an overall ability to be able to execute overall all of these different types of leaderships, because they're all going to be appropriate for different groups of individuals, as well as different situations that you might run into. So all of these situations you can develop within yourself, and you can grow on to become a better and stronger leader. And this kind of goes back into the reading on week 5 as well by Dungan and O'Shea, essentially overall going over the ability to identify leaders and to work with these leaders in their development. Again, each form of these leadership styles can be learned. They're all going to be effective in different areas, in different styles, in different situations that you might run into. Um, Again, if you can develop and understand all of these different types of leadership, you can be successful in the long run. Primary leadership describes all of these different types of leading, and all of these different types of learning the new different types of leadership. And any learning within itself can be done by the 5 discoveries. Now, these 5 discoveries basically go into first is the discovery of yourself. Who do you want to be? Basically, what do you look for in a leader, and what kind of leader do you want to become? Basically, considering this helps you develop a vision of where you want to go and provide motivation or excitement in how you can get there. Second is discovery. Basically, you take an honest assessment of yourself to identify your strengths, your weaknesses, and basically understanding the gaps of where you are currently with your self discovery, and what do you need to do in order to be able to get to your ideal self or your ideal form of leadership. Now, the second is, again, creating, understanding what you need to do to get to where you want to be. Next, you're basically creating an agenda, creating a roadmap more or less of what you need to develop to get to where you want to be. What can you do to improve certain areas? What kind of exercises can you work on to get to that step of the ideal leader, or where you want to be, whether that's in your personal relationship, work, your work, or any social environment. What do you need to work on to grow there? And the fourth is basically discovering and experimenting and practicing different and new behaviors, new thoughts, new feelings, maybe something that you don't feel comfortable with at first, but overall it's going to help you grow as a person and help you grow as a leader. Maybe if somebody would normally say something to you, maybe that's a trigger of yours, or they're pushing your buttons, and you can understand how you would normally react to it, but you understand, okay, they're pushing my buttons. This is how I would normally react. Maybe I would be upset about it. But now I'm going to experiment with maybe, smiling back at them, or showing them that this doesn't bother me, or just continuing the conversation, or maybe just starting a joke, whatever it might be. Something different to kind of, different thoughts to kind of help you get over maybe those buttons that were pushed before and get to where you want to be, so that you can have the more positive outcome. And finally, discover your binds. Basically, putting everything together, understanding you've worked in these situations. Here's my strengths. Here's my weaknesses. I know what I need to do to get to that place. And basically putting everything together, basically as a supportive and trusting relationship to provide a safe community where these processes can take place. So basically practicing this on the daily basis so that you can become a stronger leader and work on these areas and become the person that you want to be ultimately. But again, it all comes back to self-discovery and understanding what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, and nobody really likes pointing out their weaknesses, but if you can't point them out to yourself, how are you going to work on it? How are you going to be able to become stronger? And as a leader or trying to become a leader, people in most cases are going to understand your weaknesses. They might not always tell you, but to be able to understand that yourself is really going to help you become a stronger leader in the long run. Basically, the book makes you think a lot about your experiences. It gives you a lot of great examples on different examples of different leaders who may have done a situation and handled it one way and with one type of leadership experience, where there's another leader that handles basically the exact same material but in a different outcome, maybe in a different type of leadership style, and there's two completely different results. Um, it's pretty amazing to think about how, again, one set of information that you're trying to relay to somebody, but you're getting two completely different results just on how you present it, how you relate it to people, and what type of leadership style that you're using. So I definitely think that that was really eye-opening, knowing that if you're trying to have a conversation with somebody, or you're trying to positive or negative, trying to help somebody grow, or trying to give a negative, conversation, telling, say, look, you really need to work on this. This is hurting us, whatever it might be. Trying to understand these different types of leadership styles, it can essentially, in knowing the right type of leadership style to use, can basically result in the conversation or the leadership approach being very successful or having a very negative outcome to it. So really understanding that and why you're attempting that type of leadership style, I think is very interesting. I really found that to be really eye-opening, different results within my personal experiences, and maybe I could have handled this a little bit different, or I handled that well. What are some other areas where I can implement that type of leadership? It's pretty cool how it goes into the way people look at you and how your brain and your brain functions make you feel a certain way. For instance, if someone simply smiles at you, how it, just that little action makes you feel good inside, and why your brain makes you think of that person as a nice person, or someone who's potentially, their types of leadership qualities, if they're smiling when they're giving, a conversation as a leader or as an everyday individual. Just basically the brain chemistry that goes on behind that, I find to be very interesting. Um, if you can train yourself to do these small things, such as just giving somebody a simple smile when you're speaking with them, or being able to have a positive conversation, or really truly use your emotions and relate to that person, can really make a big difference in how that person looks at you. In most cases, it can take, I believe it said, up to 7 weeks for somebody to break their overall first initial impression of you. So as a leader, we've all heard you have that first impression either makes or breaks your relationship. So being able to come out with that, being able to understand that you're giving that positive outcome, but you're also there to get a job done and to be successful. People can really help look at you as a leader and somebody that they can relate to and feel comfortable coming to you. Um, Overall, again, the book had a lot of many great examples on how the different leadership styles and how they can be implemented. It can become a little redundant in a lot of different areas, um, really kind of really hitting home very thoroughly in a lot of areas, which I felt was a little bit overdone. There's not really a clear path within the book. It's not really an A to B type book. It is kind of all over the place. There's not really a clear path to where you're going in the book or what to look for. Each chapter is basically just a different area or a different idea in leadership. But overall, I think it does bring it together pretty good. It does help you understand the details, a little bit more details in your own emotional intelligence and how to build a more emotionally intelligent environment. Is that's personally within yourself, within the people that you work with. Basically, just build an environment so you can better understand people's emotions and their feelings, in ways that you can create an environment that's going to be more inviting and more intuitive to leadership. Overall, I enjoyed the book. I definitely recommend it, and I hope that I personally think I'll go into looking at a couple other of books from Daniel Goleman to get a better understanding of emotional intelligence and how to become a better leader. And I think I've already implemented a lot of these different leadership styles in myself in the workplace, and I think I've become a better leader because of it. Thank you.